Although the subtitle of our upcoming concert is The Fifth Evangelist, which is a nod to the Johann Sebastian Bach work that we're going to play, the big work on the concert, and one of the most important premieres that the Philharmonic has ever done, is the Symphony No. 2 by Ruth Gipps, a phenomenal British composer from the 20th century, unjustly and unfairly swept under the rug by time. This is going to be the first time that one of her symphonies is going to be played here in the United States, and I must say that it's been a joyous journey of discovery for both the Philharmonic and myself. Ruth Gipps was the victim of the same kind of prejudice that befell Elsa Baren, whose second symphony we did last season, which is to say, she was constantly told in the mid-late 20th century, women don't compose. You should be an administrator, you should be a music librarian, you should be a choral conductor, but certainly not a composer. And so she went on writing these amazing works, which she frequently conducted herself with her own homegrown orchestra. Gipps's second symphony is in one movement. It's a work of about 24 minutes duration. At the very outset of the symphony, she has an introduction that lasts barely 5 measures before she goes into one of those panoramic musical views that seems to be the birthright of so many British composers. This is how her second symphony begins. I mean, music of incredible breadth and passion and perfectly orchestrated. The Philharmonic has been having a particularly good time with this piece because it makes them sound so good because the orchestration is flawless. There follow several episodes based on this introductory material. Probably the most arresting part of the symphony is a march that starts up about 10 minutes later. And it starts out with just a lone snare drum, setting up a constant rhythm over which some woodwinds creep in 2 by 2 by 2, starting with just 2 piccolos, joined eventually by oboe and clarinet. And this march, in bolero-like fashion, expands, gets louder, the orchestration increases, and then it does reverse course and eventually ends up with just the piccolos again as the march fades away. And then comes the most luscious part of the piece, an absolutely drop-dead gorgeous chorale for the strings. And if you can resist that, you have no business calling yourself any form of romantic at all. I might also add that another thing that binds this symphony together, just one of those little fun things that you don't need to know, but it's fun when you do, is that there's one little germ that binds the musical materials together, just as Beethoven based the entire Fifth Symphony on the rhythmic pattern that comes back all through it. So many of the melodies in this symphony either start or have as one of their components the simple idea of 3 ascending notes. In the very beginning of the symphony, in the march, and in the little string passage that I was just playing. So here are but 3 of those variants. And that is the mark of a fine composer who can weave together a piece using materials that stick in the inner ear and therefore bind it into a logical whole. When I first heard her music, I was struck by its quality. I said to myself, well, surely one of the major British music publishing houses must handle it. So I started doing some research trying to find the source for her scores and parts. Looked at the 3 or 4 biggest names in British publishing, couldn't find anything there. Explored a few others, couldn't find anything there. So then began this journey. I wrote to the orchestra that had made the recording of the Second Symphony that I heard on YouTube. They had no record of where the scores and parts had come from. I wrote to the conductor of that recording. He couldn't remember. I wrote to the man who had written the liner notes for that recording. He didn't know. So, having become a fairly adept internet sleuth over the last several years, I read up on Ruth Gipps and found that she has a son, Lance Baker, a very prominent horn player in Great Britain, somehow tracked down an email address that looked like it was likely his, wrote to him, told him that I'd fallen under the spell of his mother's music, wanted very much to perform it. Could he please tell me where I could go to get the scores and the parts? Short time afterwards, I got a lovely email from Mr. Baker's wife, Victoria Rowe, who informed me that they had all of the materials for her symphonies up in their attic. Which ones did I want? The music has never been published. And amazingly, these 2 sweet people spent a day making PDFs of the score and the parts just so that the Philharmonic could do this United States premiere.